Good. There we go. All right. We are very thankful to have Elizabeth here with us. She joins us from Growing Independent Eaters, and she's going to be sharing her knowledge about tube weaning and common feeding concerns with all of us. Elizabeth is passionate about helping families overcome the challenges associated with G-tube weaning and other feeding needs, including oral aversion, diet expansion, and restricted oral intake. She joins us from Growing Independent Eaters, which is a team of professionals that helps wean children from feeding tubes in their homes and helps parents learn the skills they need to be able to do that on their own. They offer support to families around the world, right, Elizabeth? Not
Yeah.
just the
Yep.
US.
hmm
And they are very successful with what they do. There are lots of O Warrior families who have used their services in the past.
hmm
Before she begins, I just want to remind everybody that even though Elizabeth is an expert in the feeding world, she's not working with you or your child directly, and she's not providing any medical advice today. She's here to share her personal experience with all of us. So please direct your medical questions to your own providers.
hmm
All right, Elizabeth, I will let you get started.
Yes. Hi. Yes, I definitely will do my best to answer tube weaning and tube feeding questions as we go. I do appreciate that caveat just because I wouldn't know enough about your particular child to give really specific advice. And so I do want to make sure we keep everybody good and safe as we go through. Okay, I just prepared a little bit of a presentation that we can use with the hope too that I can give you guys as much information about how to contact us and how to be in touch. My name is Elizabeth Kraus. I've been working with Growing Independent Eaters since 2017, so a really long time. We are a business based in the US, but we are serving and supporting families in over 40 countries around the world as they make their way through the process of either tube feeding, weaning from tube feeds, or just working towards helping kids have a better and more successful long-term relationship with eating. And so we support families in all of those different spaces, either not quite ready to wean from tube feeds, actively wanting to wean from tube feeds, or either kids who've already weaned or kids who've never had a tube but are just feeling a little bit stuck in their eating. My role in that process, I am a parent coach, which means I come alongside families as part of a multidisciplinary team, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I support parents in particular in learning how do we do this and how do we make our way successfully and supportively through the process. So I've included a good email address if you want to ask additional questions or be in touch with our team. This is a great way to do it. And we did put together a discount code for anyone here. So we'll share that. And Melissa, you're welcome to share that out as well afterwards as we go. A little bit about what we do. Our motto is, growing independent eaters, bringing everyone to the family table. We do not take a really narrow approach to weaning. We really believe that tube feeding and tube weaning and eating is part of family culture. And so we want to support the entire family through that process in as interdisciplinary a way as possible. So as I mentioned, we work with people who are not quite ready to wean, people who are weaning, and people who are not. And every single one of our families gets supported by, I'm just going to skip ahead, I should have, by an interdisciplinary team, meaning every family who works with us gets a weaning team that consists of a feeding therapist, a registered dietitian, a parent coach, and a mental health counselor or social worker to help process through everything that's happened and everything you've gone through and to support you in the process of making your way through. So for tube weaning in particularly, we believe that every child is really unique and every family is really unique, which means every wean plan that we write is personalized and tailored to the needs of the family that we are working with. We do believe that there are foundational principles to eating safely and eating well. But how those principles are implemented really does depend on the family that we're working with. And so we prioritize three really foundational principles when it comes to helping learn kids how to eat. One being we want to safely introduce that appetite because appetite is our body's system that regulates eating. And we want to couple that with respectful, responsive offerings, parents who come alongside their kids in the process rather than try to make their kids get through that process. So we coach through how to do that, how to offer, what to offer, when to stop and offer, all of that. And then our third principle is that we're really child-led. In other words, we make a plan for every family, and then the way we process through that plan really depends on listening to you guys, listening to your kids, and seeing how they are going with that, and then responding and adjusting accordingly. So a little bit about outcomes. So I think probably the most prominent questions we get are, how do I know if my kiddo is ready to wean? And then how often do you guys do this successfully? We have weaned a really large number of children with a huge range of medical complexities, including infantiles. But we've worked with kids in renal failure, lots of heart kiddos, lots of developmental or neurodivergent diagnoses, different genetic diagnoses, history of extreme prematurity. I want to say a 22 weeker might have been the youngest that, in terms of they were born at 22 weeks. I think that's the littlest. We didn't wean them at 22 weeks, but that's probably the youngest kiddo I've worked with. Oops, I'm going to go back. Dysphagia, so many other things. We do have two, actually, since we have a pilot study that published last summer and a longitudinal study underway. We also published a second study that focuses on particularly on kiddos who are status post-heart transplant. So looking at weaning for kiddos with cardiac diagnoses. So the pilot study results, we only followed 31 families for that. We've obviously worked with hundreds and thousands more, but we had really, really great success and felt we were really able to validate that our method was just as successful, or sometimes in some cases even more successful than more expensive or inpatient programs. And I can give links to those studies. Melissa, I can send those to you if that would be helpful. So in general, just for statistics' sake, we have a 94% overall success rate, and a higher success rate than that for under 12 months. But we do work with lots of kids with lots of diagnoses and have found that we're able to really support them successfully. So I thought I'd give a few highlights in terms of in terms of kind of the most common questions that we get. And then I, of course, will open the floor and answer the questions that you guys have about tube feeding, tube weaning, and beyond. So a few of them being like, how do we assess whether or not a kiddo is safe candidate for a home-based tube weaning? We look at a lot of different things. So the first step every family goes through is to fill out a really comprehensive intake form that tells us as much as you can about your kiddo's background and history and their current health status. We look for everything from growth to just making sure that they are at least growing on their curve, that they've been able to grow successfully to the extent that they should. And we can dive into that if you have questions about growth later. We look to make sure that medical issues and complexities are at least well managed. Those that can't be resolved are at least well managed. We don't want to put anyone into weaning when they're kind of in the middle of navigating other, maybe more pressing medical concerns. We look for evidence of a safe swallow, or if there is no evidence of a safe swallow, we work with you to wean just enough to know if your kiddo can swallow safely, and then we adjust as we go. So we do a really thorough assessment before approving anyone to wean, and we do that assessment for free. We don't want to charge anyone anything if we don't believe that we can be helpful, and so we do a pretty thorough look through to make sure we think everything is good to go before approving kiddos to wean. And so if we have questions about your intake form, we always ask them. We try to clarify and make sure everything is safe before we get started. Foundational principles of successful and safe home-based tube weaning. I touched on those briefly before, but the three things that we really work with are the safe introduction of appetite, meaning we are not a cold turkey approach, meaning we do not just stop all tube feeds and hope that kiddos figure it out, but we do gradually and safely introduce appetite because we want kids to be in tune with their bodies and what their bodies are telling them about the need to eat and when they need to eat. And so we do believe that appetite, we don't see a lot of success from people attempting to wean without introducing appetite because, again, if you're full, you're supposed to stop eating. And so we want kids not to work against the way their bodies are designed, but to really safely introduce that to be helpful. So we believe in appetite, but we also believe that appetite is only very effective if mealtime offerings are peaceful, responsive, and respectful. So we do a lot in supporting families on what that looks like. How do we show up for our kids in an offer, whether it's at the table for those toddlers or with bottles or breast offerings for those infants? How do we do this? How do we offer in a way that is supportive and not pushy and that really is respectful to kids' cues? And then third, we really believe in being child-led, meaning we do not have a cookie cutter approach to weaning that we expect everybody to make through at the same rigor and the same pace. We want to listen to families and listen to their reports on how their kids are doing and make our way through that process in a responsive fashion. And then what does weaning look like when you wean with GIE? That looks really different for a lot of families, but we do offer virtual support for really specific reasons. We really believe that kids and families, 99% of eating takes place at home. So we believe it doesn't matter what a child will do for some clinician in some hospital program. If parents don't feel empowered to know what they're doing when they get home, and kids don't feel safe and comfortable to eat in the place where they are going to do the vast majority of eating. And so we would rather come right into where families are at and support them in moving through that process at home, trusting and believing that parents are always their kids' best advocates and best therapists. And our job is to really support parents making their way through that process and then helping to safeguard those kiddos in that as well. So anyone who weans with GIE, as I mentioned, has a really good support team and parents are in touch with us as often as they need. A minimum of once per week, we always ask, but we have families in touch with us multiple times a day to multiple times a week, and we are there to support families in the ways that feel best to them. I do, and I'll put this up at the end, but we do have a discount code for you. And then I'm happy to pass along our website as well with lots of information, lots of blog content, lots of articles, lots of ways to talk and interact with our team and our philosophy. But in general, we really exist to be as helpful and supportive as we can to families who are going through really complex processes on their own. And so, yeah, that's a bit of what we do. And I'm sure that there are probably questions. I know that was a little bit broad and vague, but Melissa, should I ask you if there's anything you can think of that I should touch on before we sort of open the floor?
No, I think that's a beautiful overview of what you all offer and what the program generally looks like. So we can go ahead and turn it over to questions. Let me just